War III inevitable?
One that is joking about World War III.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale.
Boiling point: the rising tides of global tension. The drums of war are growing louder across the globe, echoing through corridors of power and along civilian streets alike. From the escalating conflict in Eastern Europe to the volatile powder keg of the Middle East, nations are seemingly inching closer to an era of unprecedented geopolitical upheaval. World leaders exchange terse warnings, military budgets skyrocket, and alliances strengthen amid fears of imminent confrontation. The global stage feels precariously set for an event that could redefine the course of history, perhaps even plunge us into a third world war. Yet the question looms larger than ever. What would such a conflict mean in an era of advanced weaponry and delicate international alliances? The scars of the 20th century's great wars remain etched in the collective memory, and the stakes have never been higher. As humanity teeters on this precipice, the consequences of a world embroiled in global warfare could be devastating, reshaping nations, economies, and lives. Welcome to the Global Insight. Across the globe, flashpoints of conflict continue to smoulder, threatening to ignite a much larger conflagration. The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine has gripped Europe in its most serious military crisis since World War II. With no end in sight, the conflict has not only devastated the region, but also strained international relations, forcing nations to choose sides. Meanwhile, the Israel-Hamas war has further destabilized the Middle East, a region long fraught with historical grievances and modern geopolitical rivalries. Proxy wars in places like Yemen and Syria underscore how regional tensions can quickly become global battlegrounds. These conflicts are not isolated. They represent a dangerous web of alliances, hostilities, and ambitions. Superpowers like the United States, China, and Russia maneuver for influence, often at the expense of smaller nations caught in their orbit. With alliances such as NATO seeking to counterbalance rising threats, and non-aligned powers like India walking a precarious tightrope, the world appears to be sliding into an era of uncertainty. The global chessboard is more crowded and perilous than ever, with each move bringing humanity closer to a game-ending checkmate. The roots of today's rising global tensions can be traced back to the aftermath of the Cold War, a period that many hoped would herald a new era of peace. Instead, it left behind a fragmented world struggling to redefine its balance of power. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 created a vacuum that Russia has sought to fill, rekindling old imperial ambitions. Simultaneously, the United States emerged as the sole superpower, but its interventionist policies in regions such as the Middle East sowed resentment and instability. In the decades since, the rise of China as an economic and military force has upended established norms, challenging US dominance and sparking regional disputes, particularly in the South China Sea. The vestiges of unresolved territorial disputes, ethnic tensions, and ideological divides have resurfaced across the globe, reigniting conflicts that many believed had been laid to rest. The simmering grievances of the past, compounded by the proliferation of advanced weaponry and cyber warfare capabilities, now form the backdrop to an increasingly volatile international landscape. The political landscape of the 21st century is rife with fractures and rivalries that exacerbate the risk of global conflict. Russia's aggressive posturing under Vladimir Putin, marked by its annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the ongoing invasion of Ukraine, has challenged the West's resolve. Simultaneously, China's growing assertiveness in Taiwan and the Pacific underscores a bid to reshape global power dynamics. These moves have fueled a new era of great power competition, where spheres of influence are more contested than ever. Compounding these tensions are the political disruptions within Western democracies themselves. The fallout from Brexit has left Europe grappling with internal divisions, while the return of Donald Trump to the US political stage has polarized American society and strained its international alliances. In the Middle East, Hamas's attacks on Israel and Israel's retaliation have reignited decades-old hostilities, drawing in regional players and heightening global stakes. Together, these events reveal a world where political instability and ideological polarization feed a cycle of mistrust and brinkmanship, raising the spectre of widespread conflict. In response to escalating global tensions, NATO has entered a phase of unprecedented expansion, with Scandinavia emerging as a focal point of its bolstered defence strategy. Sweden and Finland, historically neutral countries, have joined NATO in a clear signal of their growing concerns over Russian aggression. This shift represents a historic realignment spurred by the Kremlin's increasingly unpredictable behaviour and the ongoing war in Ukraine. For these nations, preparation is not just strategic, it's a matter of survival. Governments in the region are taking proactive steps to prepare their citizens for potential conflict. Civil defence programmes reminiscent of Cold War measures have been revived. In Germany and the Nordic countries, authorities are encouraging citizens to maintain emergency supplies and familiarise themselves with crisis protocols. Military exercises in the Baltic region have intensified, involving NATO forces in large-scale drills aimed at deterring Russian encroachment. These developments underscore a chilling reality. Europe is arming itself for the possibility of war in a way unseen since the mid-20th century. If global tensions escalate into open conflict, the weaponry involved will redefine the scale and speed of destruction. Russia's arsenal includes advanced hypersonic missiles such as the Avangard and Kinzhal systems, capable of travelling at speeds exceeding Mach 10 and evading most modern defence systems. These weapons provide a strategic edge, allowing for rapid, precise strikes against critical targets. The threat of such technology has prompted NATO and other powers to accelerate the development of their own missile defences and countermeasures, further fueling the arms race. Meanwhile, the United States and China are advancing their military technologies from artificial intelligence-driven warfare systems to cyber capabilities that can disrupt critical infrastructure. Conventional weapons such as tanks and fighter jets have also undergone significant upgrades, making them more lethal and adaptive to modern combat scenarios. The inclusion of nuclear arsenals remains the ultimate deterrent, but their very presence raises the stakes of any miscalculation. With weapons this advanced, a full-scale war between superpowers would not resemble past conflicts. It would be far deadlier and far shorter. A war between superpowers in today's interconnected world would unleash devastation on an unprecedented scale. The conflict would likely begin with cyber attacks crippling infrastructure, communications and financial systems. Nations would target each other's satellites, blinding military operations and disrupting civilian life. Simultaneously, precision missile strikes and drone warfare would decimate key military installations and urban centres in the opening days. The speed and scale of such an assault would leave little time for diplomacy or de-escalation. Beyond the battlefield, the ripple effects would be catastrophic. Global supply chains would collapse, causing severe shortages of food, medicine and energy. Financial markets would plummet, plunging the world into economic depression. The refugee crisis would escalate to unimaginable levels as millions fled conflict zones. In the worst-case scenario, the conflict could escalate to a nuclear exchange, obliterating entire cities and rendering vast regions uninhabitable. The social, environmental and psychological scars of such a war would take generations to heal, if at all. This chilling possibility underscores why every effort must be made to avoid such a catastrophic conflict. The likelihood of a Third World War remains a subject of intense debate among experts.
Is World War III inevitable?
One that is joking about World War III.
While some argue that the spectre of mutually assured destruction serves as a deterrent, others point to the increasing frequency of proxy wars and territorial disputes as ominous signs of escalating tensions. The competition between the United States, China and Russia for global dominance creates a volatile triangle where miscalculation or miscommunication could trigger a cascade of events beyond anyone's control. The effects of such a war would reverberate far beyond the battlefield. Entire nations could collapse under the strain of military and economic pressures, and the global community could face widespread humanitarian crises. Climate change and nuclear fallout could combine to create a planet increasingly hostile to life. The psychological toll, fear, mistrust, and the erosion of global unity would linger for decades. While full-scale war remains a worst-case scenario, the world's current trajectory highlights the urgent need for diplomacy, restraint, and international cooperation to steer humanity away from the abyss. Albert Einstein once famously remarked, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." This chilling insight reminds us that the stakes of global conflict have never been higher. The modern world, equipped with weapons of unimaginable destruction, faces a future that could be irrevocably altered by one wrong move. The tensions simmering across continents are a sobering reminder of the fragility of peace and the need for vigilance, empathy, and cooperation to prevent catastrophe. As humanity stands at this crossroads, the path forward demands bold leadership and a collective commitment to resolving disputes through diplomacy rather than force. The scars of past wars must serve as lessons, not precedents, and the shared responsibility of nations to protect the future must outweigh the allure of domination. Whether we step back from the brink or tumble into the chaos of global conflict will determine the shape of the world for generations to come. That's it from the team at the Global Insight for now. We want to hear what you think. How does the growing tension in the world affect you personally? Do you believe that the current political leaders are doing enough to avert a global war? What role should everyday citizens play in fostering peace and stability? And as always, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel here at the Global Insight. And until next time, stay tuned.